Hello Year 9 and welcome to Lesson 3 of your English Literature focus on Bayonet Charge by Ted Hughes. This is the final lesson of the sequence, and at the end of this you will produce a piece of work that will go to your teacher to be marked and you will receive feedback for that. So today I will be talking you through what you need to do the very best job that you can at that piece of work. Let's move on to the learning question and we can begin. So, here is the learning question, and please make sure that you've got your pen, your paper, your copy of the poem, and you're ready to start. Because today we are asking, how do I analyse a poem from a technical perspective? And when we think about technical perspectives, this is method, this is terminology, this is the composition of the poem, and it comes down to one key word: analysis, our vocabulary today. So analysis refers to a detailed examination of the parts that make up a whole and the way they fit together. To take something apart to understand it more deeply is to analyse something or perform an analysis upon it. If you took your phone apart to see how the parts fit together and what they each did, you would be analysing your phone in quite a destructive way. When we analyse a poem or a piece of literature perhaps, we're analysing the composition of it. We are separating out the methods, the terminology, the themes. We're looking at how they work together and the interplay between them. And by doing that, we can begin to understand what the poet was trying to achieve and the story that they're trying to tell and the effect they're trying to have upon the reader. And when we're thinking about these elements and being analytical, the questions we want to ask will always start with who, what, where, when, why, and how. So we'll begin by thinking what, where, and when. What is this technique or technical feature? Where and or when in the poem is it found? So, place it in the poem, understand it's at the beginning or at the end, because that can have a real impact on why it was there and the job it's doing in terms of making the reader feel something. Talk about why and how. How does it create meaning? Relate to the themes, impact on the reader. Why did the poet make this choice? And around all of these questions, always be thinking who. Who is this for? Who is supposed to be speaking in this poem? Who wrote it? Who do they write it about? And when you've got these questions in your mind, and when you're keeping them in your mind as you read a poem, you will find that you begin to understand it on a more meaningful level. And as long as you make sure that when you write about a poem, you are answering these questions, you're explaining what and where and when and why and how, then you will be doing a good job of addressing the question you've been asked. So these are really important questions, and please do keep them in mind. So the activity that you'll complete this week is not a paragraph, as it was with Remains. It's a series of questions, a series of technical analysis questions to be answered in full sentences. You're going to follow the same procedure in terms of thinking, planning, writing, checking, and submitting as you would for any other piece. There are 15 questions in total, and I'm going to talk you through them now to make sure you fully understand them. After that, give yourself about 25 minutes to get it done, and then you can hand it in to your teacher as your English literature task is complete for the week. Right, so in stanza 1, we begin with a couple of questions about the punctuation. How is it used to alter the pace? That's the speed. And what might that reflect about what's happening? So how does the speed or the pace of the stanza actually reflect what's going on? What connotations? Remember that from our keywords, that is ideas, linked thoughts. Do we have the word raw? The effect of repeating that word. What poetic technique is used in line 5 and in line 6? And there's some follow-up questions for each of those. What do you think it implies? That is, it suggests or it hints. So full sentence answers for each of these, spotting and identifying these techniques. On to stanza 2. And in this stanza we step inside the head of the soldier and we're hearing his thoughts, we're seeing the world through his eyes. How does the poet create a sense of time slowing down? So it's another pace question. The pace changes. More repetition, the verb running. How does that contrast with what's happening in this stanza? What's the effect of the caesura in the last line of the stanza, the sibilants in the last line? So if you ever feel unfamiliar with these technical terms, you think, I don't remember what that is. If it's not on your list or you can't find it, then just look it up on the internet. Why do you think Hughes chose to move the poem into the soldier's thoughts in this stanza? So that's a question about the motive of the writer, Ted Hughes, and you have to think about what effect he was trying to achieve there. Finally, in stanza 3, what is the effect of the enjambment from the second into the third stanza, and what might it reflect? So why does stanza 2 run straight into stanza 3, and what is Ted Hughes trying to make us understand about the soldier's situation there? What do you think the hare represents to the soldier, that animal? What does that symbolize? Now, question 3 asked you to compare 3 verbs used throughout the poem: stumbling, running, and plunging. How do they feed on from each other, and what might that signify? Final 2 questions. Read lines 20 to 21. The soldier's motives, the reasons he did what he did. What does it suggest, and why is Hughes making this point? And finally, the hard consonant sounds, those alliterative sounds, touchy terror, and so on. What is the effect of those at that point? You now have 25 minutes to complete this assessment. So set your time, get your pens ready, remember to answer in full sentences. And please remember that this is the activity that's being sent into your teacher for marking and feedback, so think before you write. Plan some of your answers, the longer answers, write them, check them, and then submit them when you're happy that you've done the best that you can. Good luck.